Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today I thought I'd do a bit of a check-in on what I've read so far in June. So this is my mid-month wrap-up. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books. Today I thought I would talk about what I've read so far in June. And so far in June, it has definitely been my slowest reading month to date. So with the first book that I finished in June, I actually hit my goal for the year of 72 books read, but I have definitely been finding reading slower going in June. So I don't think I would describe it as a reading slump, more that I have obviously so many books to choose from, and at times I've struggled to pick one. And also there is another reason why my reading has been going much more slowly, and I will share that with you in a moment. So I thought we'd go through something that is stopping me from having completed as many books, then talk about what books I actually have read and what books I'm currently reading. So first of all, let's talk about what is stopping me from reading as much as usual. It's the time of the video when we hear from my old friend Don Quixote. So I did say in my TBR that I was going to make a really concerted effort to finish Don Quixote sometime, preferably in June, because I've just been saying I will read it forever. The first time I talked about this book on my channel, I made a video called The Most Intimidating Book on My Bookshelf, and that was when I decided to read this book for Ancientsathon last year. Now Ancientsathon is running again this month, and this is hosted by Tori at Hufflepuff Discovery, Jennifer Brooks and David Wiley. I thought what better time to try much harder to complete Don Quixote. If you are new here, I also tried to finish this for March of the Mammoths. I read this with a lovely group hosted by Roz over at Scally Dandling About the Books. We all planned to read it in March, going into April to read part 2. And I did read along for a little while, but then I completely failed to carry on. So, oops. And it's not that I'm not enjoying Don Quixote, it's just that I get easily distracted by other books. There are so many other books to read that I haven't really maintained any sort of schedule, or sometimes pick this up at all for a month. It does seem that I'm going for the record of how long it's taken a person to read a book ever. We're now on a year and counting with Don, but I am happy to report that I have made some progress. I was on part 1, I can't remember precisely where, but I had a good, I think 20 chapters left at least to complete part 1. First of all, I set myself the goal of reading a chapter a day, and the chapters are not long, and often the chapters are unrelated to other chapters, so you can read it in quite an episodic way, which has definitely contributed to my dipping in and out attitude as well. I resolved to read at least 1 chapter a day. I made myself a little chart and everything. I'll try and show it on here. It's a little chart on my phone, and I've been ticking it off every day. And I was so encouraged by getting to the end of part 1 and into part 2 that I wanted to try and speed myself up a bit. So I really, really would love to finish this in June. I didn't actually think that was a realistic goal before, but I have now decided to try and go for it. So I only need to read between 20 and 30 pages of this a day to get to that goal. So I'm now on to part 2, chapter 18, and as you can see, that is over halfway through the books. I am delighted with the idea that I am actually able to finish this in June if I keep persevering. It is going to mean not reading as many other books, and that's definitely why I haven't been finishing so many books, but I think it's going to be worth it, because this would be probably the biggest book on my bookshelf finished and off the giant TBR after a year of reading. That's the first time I've really been able to report that I've done a lot of reading of it, to be honest. So on to books that I have actually finished this month. And the first book I finished this month was The Widow by Fiona Barton. And this was the June pick for a book club that I join in with, which is run by AJ Dunn over at AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. AJ is running a book group to read one book a month from Penguin's list of the top 60 thrillers of all time. It's called the Killer Reads Thriller Month Book Club. If you're interested in joining that, I'll try to link the video where AJ originally talked about this concept. So, The Widow. Last month's book was The Shining, and it was really excellent. It was probably my favourite thriller so far that we've read together. And this month was definitely bottom spot. I listened to The Widow on audiobook. I don't think it was necessarily a problem with the audiobook, because sometimes I like a book a bit less if I don't like the narrator very much. But it was a narrator that I've heard before. She did some of the Ruth Galloway series. Put her name on screen because it's gone out of my brain. But I thought she did a good job largely. I thought some of the voices weren't great, but I don't think that that was what was contributing to the problem with this book for me. So The Widow, in a very brief nutshell, is about a woman, the widow, who her husband has just died, hence the title, but she looks back to a time when her husband was alive because her husband was accused of kidnapping a child, a very high profile case. It also follows a journalist. I've also forgotten her name, this is how memorable the book is. And then it also slightly follows the detective who's on the case of it. Now, for me, this was like a combination of a domestic thriller and a detective procedural type thriller or crime. I personally enjoy a detective crime procedural type book. There are series that I've loved, such as the Ian Rankin's Rebus series. For me, this book missed the mark on both domestic thriller and on crime. The detective side of it wasn't pulled off in my eyes, and I didn't enjoy the domestic storyline either. So Jean, I've remembered her name, the main character, is just a total wet blanket. Her husband was quite overbearing and bullying. This is a sort of book where I was really waiting for a massive twist, and then it would not be a book that I would recommend, unfortunately. I cannot imagine how it has managed to get onto the top 60 thrillers of all time according to Penguin. I think it's vastly overrated in that sense, and that made it all the more disappointing because I feel like everything on a top 60 list of thrillers should be an amazing thriller, and it just didn't work for me. I also didn't like two of the main themes, one of which was like paedophiles. I just didn't enjoy this at all. This was not a good book for me, and I only got through it so quickly because I happened to have quite a lot of chores to do at the time, so the audiobook went by quite quickly, and that's probably the best thing that I can say about this book, unfortunately. I have only actually finished two other books. One was a reread. It was Sleeping Murder, Miss Marple's Last Case by Agatha Christie. I read this last week for Christiefest, which is run by Julie over at Hungry Bookworm and Lil at Lil's Vintage World. Do go and check those lovely ladies out if you are interested in Christiefest. And Christiefest reads one Agatha Christie book a month. For me, they are all rereads because I have now finished all of Agatha Christie's main books, apart from the ones she wrote under a pseudonym. I love this. This is still my favourite Miss Marple after a reread, and of the ones I've reread, it's definitely my favourite Miss Marple. I'm personally more a Poirot person, but in this one I really think Miss Marple comes into her own. She's just brilliant in this. It's Marple at her best, in my opinion. And it's also Christie at her best because she actually, although this came out after her death, she wrote it during World War II and it was locked away in a vault in case of her death. And you can really see that this is one she wrote at the absolute height of her powers. So great read. Highly recommend this. If you are working through Miss Marple, I really don't think it matters if you read this last or not. It's a really enjoyable one. So Yeah, Sleeping Murder. I'm not going to give too much of a summary because this was a reread, but this is about Gwenda and Giles who move into a house, and Gwenda starts to believe, even though she's lived out of the country for all of her life, that she's been in this house before. And it's seems a little bit spooky at first, especially when Gwenda starts to believe that a murder took place in the house. Miss Marple gets on the case and it wraps up wonderfully. So brilliant, brilliant book. Very glad I've reread this one. And finally, we have the only book I've managed to finish so far this month. That is from the Giant TBR, and that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I got this one as a Christmas present. I've wanted to read this book for absolutely years, and I wasn't disappointed. It was a bit different maybe to what I thought it might be going to be. Maybe a bit less dystopian than I was picturing, although it clearly is set in a dystopian time and in the future, but I really, really enjoyed this one. This is narrated by Kathy, who reminisces about her time at Hailsham School, which is like a seemingly idyllic boarding school type place. There's obviously something like an undercurrent of something else among these students, but it's mainly a story about Kathy and her two closest friends, Ruth and Tommy, and how they end up. So it sort of tells their past in a couple of parts and their present in one part. And I really, really enjoyed this book. I wouldn't say it was a 5-star for me. It came close. It was a lovely book to read. As I say, my only real complaint was that it wasn't maybe as dystopian as I was expecting, but this is a really subtle and interesting story, and I enjoyed it more than Clara and the Sun, which I've also read this year. And I definitely think Kazuo Ishiguro is a consistently good writer who I will look out for more of his books, because I've really enjoyed both of them and noticed sort of similar themes in both of them as well. But yeah, so I finished this one at the weekend and I'm really glad I have. Apart from Don Quixote, what have I still got currently on the go? My audiobook at the moment is Project Hail Mary by Alison Weir. I'm not hugely far into this, but at the moment, two things about it really. I find it a little bit too sciencey for me. There seems to be a lot of information coming at me all the time, and I vastly prefer the parts that are in sort of present time and deal with the main character on the spaceship sort of trying to work out who he is, what to do with the ship, and so on. I'm kind of enjoying it. It's not quite what I expected. The audiobook is narrated in a very funny way, so I am quite enjoying some of the humour. But yeah, the jury's out on that one at the moment. Also started these two. I've started Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. This is for a project that I started by reading Clara and the Sun, and I have got other books out for it from the library, but I haven't yet got any further with it. So really looking forward to reading the rest of this. This has got off to a great start. It's a very short book and I'm already, I would say, at least a third of the way in, and I'm really enjoying it. It's very unusual perspective. This is written in second person, but I think it's done really, really nicely. I really like the language in this. I'm really, really enjoying this book. I also have on the go the Six Tudor Queens book, Katherine of Aragon, and I've read at least 100 pages of this now, about 10 chapters, and I was really on a roll with it and really enjoying it. I definitely would say I still am, but I have put it down for over a week now, so I will go back to that. And that is for the Tudoralong read-along, which is hosted by the lovely Gemma over at Gemma Books, Dani at Dani's Book World, and Emily at Novelle Novels. I will link all of their channels in the description down below. Still plenty of time to get involved in the Tudoralong. I'm also reading, as a buddy read with Emily at Novelle Novels, I'm reading some of the plays of Oscar Wilde, and we've read one play so far, which was Lady Windermere's Fan, which was hilarious. So I'm looking forward to reading the other 3 plays in the collection with Emily later in the month. So that's a really good one too. So I know that sounds like a lot of things on the go, but I am taking most of them really, really slowly, and my priority at the moment is to read at least 30 pages of Don Quixote a day, or at least 20, and try to get it finished by the end of June. So if I come back to you at the end of June with a wrap up that is just Don Quixote, then that is why, because it's taking up quite a lot of my time. But I will continue to read other shorter books alongside Don, and I will also be listening to audiobooks and carrying on with those buddy and group reads. Please do let me know in the comments down below how you're getting on with reading in June. Have you finished some books and have you enjoyed them? If you've enjoyed this video today, please do give it a like. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will hope to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.